Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating biological link between what is sitting right there on your plate and how you experience stress throughout your day. If you've been feeling the pressure lately, well, you are absolutely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. We often think of stress as something purely psychological, right? A looming deadline, a difficult conversation, just a heavy mental burden. But today, we're totally challenging that myth. We're going to put on our biological detective hats and look at how the food you eat can literally rewire your body's chemical response to stress. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with section 1, the cortisol-stress connection. Then 2, diet, inflammation, and stress. We'll follow that up with 3, nutrients to metabolize cortisol. 4, blood sugar and hydration. 5, the gut-brain axis. And finally, 6, foods to limit or avoid. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the cortisol-stress connection. To really understand how to fix the problem, we first need to diagnose it by looking at stress on a purely chemical level inside your body. Enter cortisol. You've probably heard it called the stress hormone. When you face a threat, whether that's an actual physical injury or even just a mental threat, like a really intense work email, your adrenal gland releases cortisol to trigger your fight or flight response. Now, cortisol isn't inherently bad. Actually, it's a vital survival tool. It regulates your sleep cycles, your blood pressure, and your blood sugar. But it becomes the biological villain when it's triggered constantly over a long period of time. When you're exposed to this hormone constantly, it leads to a chronic stress response that wreaks absolute havoc on both your mental and physical health. We are talking about increased anxiety, depression, fatigue, weight gain, and even a significantly higher chance of diabetes and heart disease. The need for a solution is incredibly urgent, and, that brings us right to our daily habits. Section 2, diet, inflammation, and stress. Let's shift our focus a bit. If biological chemistry is the problem, physical inputs, specifically our diet, can directly alter these chaotic states. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast in our dietary choices. Researchers have found that people eating a standard American diet, which is notoriously high in fats, sugars, and simple carbs, had significantly higher cortisol levels. But on the flip side, people eating an anti-inflammatory diet, one that resembles a Mediterranean style packed with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and polyunsaturated fats, well, they were actually able to counteract the impact of cortisol. Let's see how this builds into an even larger systemic issue. When we eat foods that cause inflammation, we essentially trigger a low-level stress response. Your immune system sends out macrophages and cytokines to go kill off pathogens, but as a side effect, it ends up damaging healthy tissue. This inflammation increases intestinal permeability, which is often called leaky gut. Bacteria slips into the bloodstream, triggering even more inflammation and creating this highly damaging, escalating cycle of stress. So how do we fight back? We establish what we call our whole foods anchor. Before we look at specific nutrients, it's so vital to know that relying on the grocery store produce aisle is vastly more effective than popping isolated supplement pills. Why? Because your gut health absolutely depends on the complex fiber and diverse nutrient profile found naturally in whole foods. Supplements just can't replicate that kind of complexity. Section 3, nutrients to metabolize cortisol. Now let's introduce the heroes of our story. We're going back into biological detective mode to examine exactly how specific whole foods fight back against stress. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly targeted these 3 nutrient categories are at chemically neutralizing your stress response. First, B vitamins, especially B12, literally help metabolize or burn off cortisol. You'll find these in things like eggs, chicken, and nutritional yeast. Next up, omega-3s, found in salmon, walnuts, chia seeds. These are absolute powerhouses for dramatically reducing that systemic inflammation we just talked about. And finally, magnesium is essential for relaxing your muscles and further metabolizing that cortisol. But there is a totally fascinating biological trap here. When you get stressed, your body literally flushes magnesium and potassium out in your urine. Because low magnesium intensifies stress, it creates this vicious cycle where stress depletes the very nutrient you need to calm down. The good news? You can break the cycle with things like pumpkin seeds, spinach, and yes, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate contains magnesium and high amounts of flavonoids, which are scientifically backed to lower stress reactivity in your adrenal glands. How great is that? Section 4, blood sugar and hydration. Beyond just specific vitamins and minerals, we need to look at the foundational importance of meal timing and hydration for baseline nervous system stability. Let me ask you directly, Have you ever felt inexplicably anxious or agitated only to realize you simply waited way too long to eat? We've all been there. When your blood sugar crashes, it signals an immediate physical crisis to your brain. Going too long between meals is a massive physical stressor. The solution here is stabilization. Eat regular, consistent meals, and make sure to incorporate protein-rich foods, beans and legumes, to keep those levels perfectly steady. Hydration is the other foundational pillar. Failing to drink enough water isn't just bad for your general performance, it literally manufactures stress hormones right in your body. To put that into perspective, researchers looked at young soccer players and found that those who are more dehydrated had tangibly higher cortisol levels in their system. Dehydration equals physical stress. It really is that simple. Section 5. The gut-brain axis. Next up, we transition into one of the most fascinating biological ecosystems in human anatomy, the digestive tract, and how it heavily dictates your mental health. Okay, prepare to have your mind blown by the serotonin secret. When we think of serotonin, the neurotransmitter responsible for feelings of well-being and happiness, we usually picture the brain. But the reality is, most of the serotonin in your entire body isn't in your head at all. It's located right in your gut. This underlines exactly why feeding your gut's good bacteria is absolutely non-negotiable if you want a calm, resilient mind. So how exactly do we feed those good bacteria? Well, the magic number is 30. One dietitian recommends a weekly goal of eating 30 different types of plants. This variety provides a wide spectrum of prebiotic fiber. Those good bacteria in your gut actually eat that fiber, and keeping them happy is exactly what keeps your gut-brain axis functioning optimally. Now, while prebiotic fiber feeds the good bacteria, you can also ingest the good bacteria directly through probiotics. These fermented powerhouses like live yogurt, kimchi, kombucha, kefir, and sauerkraut are the absolute best ways to populate your gut with the beneficial microbes that directly support your mental health and lower your stress. Section 6. Foods to limit or avoid. We've talked extensively about what to add to your plate. Now we need to pivot to the specific dietary pitfalls that actively undo this hard work and spike your cortisol. These are your dietary villains. Alcohol and excessive caffeine directly stimulate the stress response. Meanwhile, saturated fats, simple sugars like the ones found in sodas and candies, and simple carbs like white breads actively trigger that systemic inflammation we discussed earlier. And remember, when inflammation spikes, cortisol spikes right along with it, sending your body's stress response into absolute overdrive. But here is an absolutely crucial caveat for all of you focused learners out there. The goal here is not strict, stressful deprivation. Stressing out obsessively over every single carb you eat completely defeats the purpose. Not all carbs or sugars are bad. The key is mindful moderation. Enjoy them, but maintain a mindful awareness of how these foods actually make you feel and how they impact your personal stress levels a few hours after eating them. To wrap up our explainer today, I really want to leave you with this empowering thought. Managing stress absolutely requires a whole body approach. Sleep, exercise, boundaries, they all matter. But food is a piece of the stress puzzle that you have total control over 3 times a day. You wield incredible biological power every single time you sit down for a meal. So what will you feed your nervous system next?